We all love a good story, and I remember when as a kid walking through with my grandmother. She's the one where I get my love for gardening from. We'd walk around and she'd tell you little stories about the flowers. This one, was da-da-da-da, go on and tell a little story about it. So, plants do have interesting stories, and some are legends and just stories that have been passed down generation after generation. A legend is a very old story or a set of stories from ancient times, or the stories, not always true, that people tell about a famous event or a person. Lore, again, is a body of traditions and knowledge on a subject or held by a particular group, typically passed from person to person by word of mouth. The world of plants has long been inspiring and magical in many cultures. So inspiring, in fact, that references to plants are more ingrained into our lives than we might think. Gardening, agriculture, and plant relationships have been very central to humanity, so much so that folklore surrounds them found its way into ancient beliefs, customs, and mottos today, even the names of plants themselves. How did it come to pass? Take a deeper look at the plant world, ranging across cultures all around the world, and how their mystical influences still touch our lives in modern times. And even some peculiar beliefs we once had or might still have about them. I'm sure it will make you think different about the many trees, shrubs, and herbs you grow in your garden, and maybe get you to consider completely new and magical ones. Ever heard of the saying, knock on wood? It's a habit many of us still uphold, especially when one is in need of some good luck, a bit of courage, or hope that something will go well. But did you know that knocking on or touching wood is actually a tradition steeped in plant folklore? Some of us might knock on wood or talk about it without a second thought, as if it's a perfectly normal thing to do, and in many ways it is. But the origins of the saying stretch way back in time to the beliefs of our ancestors. Think about it. So many cultures relied on trees. For some ancient peoples, trees were like a source of refuge and safety, climbed to avoid danger. For others, they provided shelter and materials for fire, food, and medicine. Because trees provided so much, certain cultures' fondness and even awe of the trees grew over time. It's not 100% certain from where exactly the saying originated. Some sources find the strongest link to ancient pagan Germanic cultures who held beliefs that protective spirits lived within trees. But really, you can find awe in the protective power of trees in many other cultures too. Even similar sayings to knock on wood in languages like Arabic, Swedish, and countries like Trinidad and Tobago and Brazil. Trees move and make noise in the wind, so it's no wonder to think that trees could house gods and spirits, a belief held by certain ancient people. Even today, you can reach a tree and touch the wood. It gives you a safe and protective feeling, a comforting thought rooted deep in our collective folklore memory. When a rainstorm's coming, what do you try to get under a tree maybe to help stay out of the rain? Knocking on wood wasn't the only thing exclusively influenced by our reverence for trees. Many other beliefs sprouted throughout history and folklore as well. Sure, touching wood originated from a hope that protective tree spirits would watch over us, making sure that future events would go well. But with the belief in good spirits also came superstitions about bad tree spirits. Let's take a look at some of the most revered trees. Among their ranks, some common species of tree or shrub you may find in your garden, and I'm sure you won't even look at them the same way again. The holy oak. In ancient time, oaks were regarded as particularly good and holy trees. Beloved of the Druids and kept in their sacred groves, these wonderful centennials were thought to have magical qualities and not just protective ones. In fact, if you were struggling home from If you were struggling home from battle or running a fever, the water collected in an oak tree was often used for healing these ailments well before modern medicine. Oaks contain tannins, which are used for tanning skins and giving the trait its name. These are also important in aging flavors for wines. The tannins were thought to provide this apparent healing magic, but it's really not magic at all. Tannins in oak trees are still used to bring down fever and staunch wounds among herbalists today, being a potent astringent. As you probably well know, oaks are very common and well-known trees, with many species found in gardens and yards all around the world. These trees can be categorized in two broad types: red oaks and white oaks. As a general rule, white oaks can be identified by their smoother, broad-lobed leaves, as you can see there. And there are even some evergreen oaks in the mix. White oaks are favored for their comparatively higher tannin amounts than red oaks, making them more healing and maybe even more magical. The English, or the common oak of Europe, is a wonderful tree of the white oak category. While it is beautiful, this type may be too big for most gardeners, casting a bit too much shade. There are some beautiful cultivars in this species available, but all are quite large and grow slow. A favorite of the oaks is the northern red oak. As the name would suggest, red oaks exhibit bright red foliage in the fall, unlike the paler tan or brown foliage of the white oak during that time of year. At other times, you can identify red oaks by their elegant green leaves, which are more pointed with their lobes. They have red acorn. The red oak acorns take a little over 2 years to mature enough to germinate after they hit the ground. There's the difference in the acorns. There is something very satisfying about collecting acorns and watching them sprout into young oaks. You can almost call it magic. Ever seen a pine tree? Look at the cross at the top of the pine tree, and I'm not talking about the wooden kind. But around Easter each spring, some species in certain regions start to develop shoots with a familiar shape. This sighting has led to a popular legend that pine trees know when it's Easter. If you look at the tops of the pine trees about 2 weeks before Easter, you will see the yellow shoots. As the days get closer to Easter Sunday, the tallest shoot will branch off and form a cross. By the time Easter Sunday comes around, you will see that most of the pine trees will have small yellow crosses on all of the tallest sprouts. While it's true that these crosses appear in late March or early April for most of the country, the inspirational story linking them to the Christian holiday is just that, a story, although a lovely one. Still, believers might enjoy spotting the shoots every season and interpreting them as a sign of the religious celebrations to come. Some of the other plants that have stories also, here's the mullein, and it's a favorite use in plant borders, and it has some common names that you may know best as mullein, such as hag's taper and candlewick plant. The woolly flowering stems grow up to 6 feet tall. They're often dipped in fat and lit as tapers or a candlewick, and the leaves were sometimes used as floor coverings or insoles in your shoes. Maybe giving this a try in your garden shoes would be a good thing to try out. Lighting a hag's taper was also used to ward off bad witches and sorcery, and the dried fluff from the leaves and stems was made into wicks for candles. It was also a superstition that witches would use the tapers themselves for practicing their magic. A most useful plant, mullein is still sometimes used today among herbalists as a home remedy. The leaves and flowers contain anti-inflammatory compounds, which are said to be especially helpful against coughs and lung issues. While traditional use is strong, however, medical research on these effects is weak. The plants are biennial. They grow as a rosette of soft leaves in their first year, and then they bloom with striking flowers the year before they died. So you can kind of see the soft one there and the plant and the flowers. And if you ever take the drive to Huntsville on I-45, right about the roadside parks, they start blooming in the spring of the year. They're just these real tall spikes of yellow flowers along the highway. And there are a great many garden varieties to choose from today. As several lovely hybrids these have been produced. The raspberry ripple in particular, which is that pink one on the side there. Flower characteristic is a particularly pretty, being a cultivar of the wild mullein, chosen for the raspberry red flower characteristics rather than mulleins' typical yellow flowers. Don't rue the day. Rue is also called the herb of grace, a reference you may stumble across in the works of Shakespeare. Whole bushes of this plant were used in the 16th century in churches to sprinkle holy water on parishioners as a sign of repentance and saving grace of God. As far back as Hippocrates, rue was also used for medicinal purposes to treat cramps, spasms, pains, and coughs. An even more interesting thing about rue, this garden plant made it into the Four Thieves vinegar. This was a famous but very secret concoction made in the Middle Ages, which allowed thieves to plunder precious belongings from the dead who had succumbed to the bubonic plague, all without getting sick themselves. The herb was so potentially aromatic and bitter, it was able to prevent the spread of the disease by repelling insects and pests, such as fleas, which were the major carrier of the plague in those days. And it still makes an excellent insect repellent today. Rue is a small garden plant with the blue-gray foliage, and it is good foil for other colors. It's historically a good herb in folklore, but there are some negative notions about it that we still carry with us today. In fact, the verb to rue comes from the name of the plant. To rue something means to have deep regret that it happened, usually because it was frustrating, sad, and painful. And this may come because when you get rue on you, it causes your skin to become irritated. And those who stumble upon rue deeply regret it. They find it all too easy to compare regrettable experiences to rue, giving rise to the saying, "You will rue the day," a line taken from Shakespeare. Foxgloves that I've tried to grow and grow and grow, and they don't grow here for me. It's an interesting name for a flower, foxgloves. But was this actually based on the belief that foxes wore gloves? Not exactly. Foxgloves are the common name for the digitalis genus, used in ancient times as a drug and still used today in some heart medicines. Digitalin is extracted from the plant, and it can help steady rapid heartbeats and arrhythmias in small doses. However, the constituents of this beautiful flower were used as a poison in old times, since these same cardiac glycosids are highly toxic and best kept away from pets and small children. Of course, foxes never wore gloves, but the name is recorded in England as far back as the 14th century. It is probably a distortion of folk's glove. Good folk was the name sometimes used by the fairies, and these little beings were said to live inside the flowers, perhaps being responsible for their potencies, both good and bad. The blooms are heliotropic, and they follow the light. During old times, when fairies were strongly believed in, the plant was said to be moved towards any fairy person that would be passing by. These flowers are biennials, and they produce leaves one year and flower stems the year after. The common foxglove grows delightfully white flowers. These tall, stately blooms look very ghostly and beautiful and are even visible as dusk falls. Then there are other hybrids that are available as well in shades of apricots and pinks. Then we have magical herbal spices. Gardens can be abundant and useful, especially for growing spices for cooking, healing, simple beauty, and enjoyment. Interestingly, there are very powerful and magic-tinged memories of our most favorite culinary spices. Some of them are quite fascinating. Angelica, as the word would suggest, it's certainly an angelic plant full of good magic. Legends say that a holy monk dreamed of talking with an angel who showed him an herb that would heal the bubonic plague, and it just so happened to be Angelica. Angelica is a punctuation plant for your garden, visual mosaic of beauty. The leaves and stems, when cut very young, are delicious when crystallized with sugar or syrup and eaten as a snack. Fennel, this useful herb, was hung over doors to prevent the devil or witches from gaining access to homes with dark magic, and the fennel seeds were put in keyholes for the same reason. The spice has an anise seed flavor, and chewing a little bit can help relieve nausea. It is a decorative garden plant, even if you don't plant to harvest it as a vegetable. The bronze cultivar of fennel with the simple name bronze fennel is particularly beautiful, and some butterflies love it too. Oregano, the word for this special spice comes from the Greek words oros and ganos, meaning mountain and joy, and was said to harbor joy wherever it grew. In ancient Rome, it was used to crown brides and grooms to wish them future happiness. The flowers of oregano are a great Mediterranean-inspired border addition that's very hardy, and it blooms all summer long. Oregano is bushy, woody, branched perennial member of the mint family. Using extensively in a variety of cuisines, it is known for its earthly, robust, aromatic flavor. In fact, we like it so much that according to some sources, Americans consume more than 14 million pounds of this tasty herb every year. A number of different varieties of oregano are available, all with slightly different flavors. Greece, the birthplace of so much that is good to our universe, also gave us oregano. In ancient Greece, the aromatic herb was described as joy of the mountain and said to have been created by the goddess Aphrodite. Citizens of the birthplace of democracy also believed that oregano safeguarded good luck and good health. In that long ago culture, the herb symbolized joy and was often planted near homes to ward off evil spirits. The conquering Romans appreciated this culinary herb and had carried it with them, spreading it hither and yon as they invaded territory after territory. Interestingly, oregano didn't find huge popularity in the United States until soldiers stationed in Italy returned from World War II, and they brought back the tasty herb that they had learned to love in pizza sauce. While a sweet and unassuming herb used quite often in cooking, parsley has a reputation for belonging to the devil in some northern European cultures. The plant is notoriously slow to germinate, and old stories would have it that it went 7 times to the devil before it would germinate. Any seeds that failed to grow were the ones kept by Satan himself. We're all familiar with parsley, often used as a garnish in our favorite dishes, but its usefulness goes beyond visual appeal on a plate. Parsley's culinary applications are extensive, and it offers many outstanding health properties with beneficial vitamins, minerals, oils, and antioxidants. It was used by the Greeks in the victory wreaths they made for athletic competitions, and the Romans would include it in bridal sprays to ward off evil spirits. In medieval Europe, it was thought that only pregnant women and witches could grow it successfully. At one time, it was thought to be a symbol of death and was used as a funeral herb. Or it's served on the cedar plate at the Passover. It's used as a springtime symbol of life's perpetual renewal. Sage was once dubbed a cure-all by many ancient herbalists in both Europe and Asia. Some Arab physicians even believed that it could cure immorality. The genus name salvia comes from the Latin term to save. It also dates at least as far back as the Middle Ages, when it was prized by religious practitioners, herbalists, and cooks for its holy, healing, and nourishing properties. We have roses, which are the flower of love. The rose has been an adored flowering shrub for centuries, a sentimental shared among different cultures all around the world. Legend has it that once all roses were thought to be white, until Venus, the Roman goddess of love, cut herself on the thorns and turned the flower red forever with her blood. For that reason, many associate the rose with love and romance. There is other folklore about the rose, however, that doesn't have to do with the classic notion of love. The legend of the Cherokee rose, for example, it's the state flower of Georgia, by the way. It centers around a species that came to the U.S. originally from China. A close-up of the delicate white flower with the yellow center of the Cherokee rose, as you can see there, it's the yellow center there. Okay. In the latter half of 1838, Cherokee people who had not voluntarily moved west earlier were forced to leave their homes in the east. The trail to the west was long and treacherous, and many were dying along the way. The people's hearts were heavy with sadness, and their tears mingled with the dust of the trail. The elders knew that the survival of the children depended on their strength of the women. One evening around the campfire, the elders called upon their heaven dweller. They told him of the people's suffering and tears. They were afraid the children would not survive to rebuild the Cherokee nation. The heaven dweller spoke to them. To let you know how much I care, I will give you a sign. In the morning, tell the women to look back along the trail where their tears have fallen. I will cause to grow a plant that will have 7 leaves for the 7 clans of the Cherokee. Amidst the plant will be a delicate white rose with 5 petals. In the center of the blossom will be a pile of gold to remind the Cherokee of the white man's greed for the gold found on the Cherokee homeland. This plant will be sturdy and strong, with stickers on the stems. It will defy anything which tries to destroy it. The next morning, the elders told the women to go look back down the trail. A plant was growing fast and covering the trail where they had walked. As the women watched, blossoms formed and slowly opened. They forgot their sadness. Like the plant, the women began to feel strong and beautiful. As the plant protected its blossoms, they knew they would have the courage and determination to protect their children who would begin a new nation in the West. A Confederate rose. David Bradley, this is for you. Once the Confederate rose was pure white. During the Civil War, a soldier was fatally wounded in battle. He fell upon the rose as he lay dying. During the course of 2 days he took to die. He bled more and more on the flower, till at last the bloom was covered with his blood. When he died, the flower died with him. Thereafter, the Confederate rose opens white, and over the course of the 2 days that the blooms last, they turn gradually from white to pink to almost red. When the flower finally blooms, when the flower finally falls from the bush. The Confederate rose, or Hibiscus mutabilis, is actually a Chinese import, and it was brought into English gardens in the 1600s. It is said to have gained favor in the South due to its ease of cultivation during the hard financial times after the Civil War. The Confederate rose is a member of the hibiscus family, which includes both the tropical hibiscus and the hardier rose of Sharon. Christmas plants. There's a lot of Christmas plants that have stories that go with them. The poinsettia, which is probably the most popular symbol at Christmas, they have long been used to decorate for the holiday season, also known by the Spanish name of Flores de Noche Buena, or flower of the holy night. The poinsettia is beautiful and it's as intriguing as some of the legends that surround it. Some say it's because the scarlet petal-like bracts represent the Star of Bethlehem, and the red petals stand for Jesus' blood. Others believe it's more magical, involves a young Mexican girl named Pepita. The legend goes like this. Pepita wanted more than anything to present to the Christ child a special gift on Christmas Eve, but she had no money. Crying as she walked to church, she saw an angel who instructed her to gather weeds from the roadside and present them to the Christ child. Pepita took the angel's advice and gathered a bouquet of weeds to take to the church. Upon entering the church, she placed the weeds at the feet of the Christ child, and suddenly her humble weeds burst into brilliant red blooms. Another story attributes poinsettia's popularity to Joel Robert Poinsett, the first U.S. ambassador to Mexico. Ambassador Poinsett was so attracted to these crimson-leaved native Mexican plants that he transplanted some in his greenhouses in South Carolina. There he grew and propagated them, sharing cuttings and plants with many horticulture friends. To the date of his death, December the 12th, marks National Poinsettia Day. There's several different varieties of poinsettias, as you know. In the last few years, there's been even new varieties introduced. The fir tree, the Christmas tree. It's an old German tradition dating back to well before the time of Christ. According to the beliefs of the Nordic tribes, winter, with its shortening days and trees losing their leaves, represented the death of the world. But with the right rituals and sacrifices, it was possible to turn the tide and bring it back to life. So they celebrated Yule, the festival of renewal, as soon as the days began to lengthen, which was around Christmas. The fir tree was at the center of these festivities. As it kept its needles even in this period of death, it represented immortality. So they decorated the trees with ribbons and candles for the festival. With time, the festival of the Yule and the Christmas festival became one, and the tradition of the decorated tree became one of Christmas. German mercenaries are said to have brought the traditional tree to North American soil. Holly, here's another old European tradition, but this time of Celtic origin. The holly tree was also winter hardy, and moreover, its red fruits were poisonous. The Druids particularly venerated poisonous plants, which were very powerful in their eyes. With the arrival of Christianity, this plant became part of the Christmas celebration. Legend has it that until the arrival of Jesus, the fruits of the holly tree were white. The holly was used to make Jesus' crown of thorns, and the blood from the crown would have colored the fruit red. Since then, all holly trees have red fruits in memory of the Passion and the love of Christ, and they're used to decorate houses. But beware, in France, it is believed that you should never bring holly branches into the house before December the 23rd. Otherwise, something bad will happen. Mistletoe. Mistletoe is one of the most famous symbols of Christmas and also the most recognizable. It is one of the most sacred and magical plants in Christian folklore. The sprigs of this plant are extensively used in Christmas decorations, and it is also believed that the plant can protect the house from lightning and fire. This is why many people also leave the sprigs all the year round. There is also a tradition believing that mistletoe is a plant of peace, and that a kiss under this plant ensures undying love and friendship. The belief that no lady standing under decorated mistletoe can refuse to be kissed is obviously a major attraction for young men. And a kiss under mistletoe is often interpreted as a proposal of marriage. Though most of these beliefs and superstitions are of pagan significance, they are still prevalent in all their glory, the legend of Mistletoe being a widely celebrated one. How many of you have been kissed under the mistletoe?
Just once?
You like it?
The Christmas cactus. The legend says that the cactus, it comes from Brazil, home of the Christmas cactus. A young boy who lived in the Amazon jungle prayed to God to give him a little sign of Christmas in his hot and stuffy world. On Christmas Day, he woke up to find that the jungle had been filled with flowers overnight. The cacti that grew on the branches of the surrounding trees had all begun to bloom at the same time. Moreover, with their drooping habit, they were reminiscent of Christmas bells. And so yet another legend was born. Amarylis. In Argentina, where amaryllis bloom wild at Christmas, this legend is told. In his excitement to announce the birth of Jesus in Bethlehem, the archangel dropped his trumpet. As the trumpet fell to the ground, it turned into a beautiful trumpet-shaped flower. Since then, the amaryllis always blooms at Christmas to announce the birth of Christ. And Greek mythology brings us the story of Amarylis, a love-struck maiden who longed for the handsome, cold-hearted Altio. Desperate to win his love, she pierced her heart with a golden arrow and then visited his cottage daily, shedding drops of blood along the way. On the 13th day, beloved scarlet flowers bloomed along the path. Altio was enamored, and Amaryllis' heart was healed. One of the most revered plants ever thought of as the Christmas herb is rosemary, the symbol of remembrance. Rosemary is a native plant to the Holy Land, where it grows in very large hedges. One legend says that the rosemary plant grows to a height of 6 feet in 33 years, the height and life of Jesus. Another tells of the Holy Family and their plight to Egypt. The family stopped to rest by a stream next to a large white and flowering rosemary bush. Joseph placed Mary's blue coat across the bush. When Mary awoke, she washed the baby's clothes in the stream and laid them to dry across the aromatic rosemary. Once the clothes were dry and had been removed, the white flowers had never changed to the soft blue. The white flowers had forever changed to the soft blue of Mary's coat. Many herbs honor the Christmas season as their time to flower. Some believe that rosemary blooms on January the 6th, the Epiphany, when Jesus was presented to the 3 wise men. By the way, did you know that rosemary in Latin means rose of Mary? Christmas rose. Christmas is a season of giving gifts, thereby showing love towards one another. This does not mean that the gifts are sole expressions of your love. No gift is costlier or more valuable than something that comes straight from the heart. The tradition of gifts during Christmas originated from the kind gestures of the 3 wise men who bought expensive gifts for the infant Jesus to welcome him into the world. Since then, people have made gifts a mandate for Christmas, but this must be remembered, as the legend of the Christmas rose will show you, that the gesture counts more than the gift. Perhaps the legend originated just to teach people that no matter what your gift, it must be from the heart and soul. Even if the gift in question is just a flower, it is owing to this legend that the Christmas rose, the flower which only blooms during the chill of winter, has become an important part of Yuletide celebrations. On a cold December night, everybody was coming to see their new Savior, and they brought him all kinds of gifts and presents. The 3 wise men came in with their valuable gifts of myrrh, frankincense, and gold, and offered them to baby Jesus. At that point, a shepherdess, Madeline, who had seen the wise men passing through, reached the door of the stable to see the child. However, being very poor and having brought nothing to offer to the child, she felt helpless and started weeping quietly at the sight of all the wonderful gifts that the 3 wise men had got the child. Earlier, she had searched in vain for flowers all over the countryside, but there was not even a single bloom to be found in the bitter cold. An angel outside the door was watching over her and knew about her fruitless search. He took pity on her, and when he saw her head droop down in sorrow, he decided to help her with a little miracle. He gently brushed aside the snow at her feet, and where her tears had fallen, sprang a beautiful cluster of waxen white winter roses with pink-tipped petals. Then he softly whispered into the shepherdess's ear that these Christmas roses are far more valuable than any myrrh, frankincense, or gold, for they are pure and made of love. The maiden was pleasantly surprised when she heard these words, and joyfully gathered the flowers and offered them to the holy infant, who, seeing that the gift was reared with tears of love, smiled at her with gratitude and satisfaction. Thus the Christmas rose has become a symbol of hope, love, and all that is wonderful in this season. Then evergreens, popular at Christmas. They're also commonly associated with Christmas. The most obvious is the Christmas tree itself, which dates back to the 15th century in Germany. Their ability to survive in the coldest of regions has made them symbols of immortality in many cultures. Holly, a legend says, sprang from the footprints of Christ as he walked the earth. In addition, the sharp leaves symbolize Jesus' thorny crown and the red berries his blood. The juniper was said to be one of the friendly plants that the Holy Family met on the long road from Bethlehem to Egypt. With Herod's soldiers close behind, Joseph was looking for a safe place to hide his family, when a large juniper opened its branches and beckoned them inside to soft, fragrant safety. These are many legends about Christmas folklore that have been passed on from generation to generation. They remind us of the meaning of Christmas and help us share in the history of people who have celebrated the special holidays over the years. The passion flower. It has always fascinated people. Its color, intricate shape, and many parts explain why. It also has a very distinct fruity smell of grapes and gardenia. Back in the 1600s, Spanish Christian missionaries explained each part of the flower with the story of the passion of our Lord Jesus Christ. The passion flower blossom, especially the flower of the purple passion fruit, is often used to symbolize events in the last hours of the life of Jesus Christ. Thus, the color purple signifies the season of Lent. The corona represents the crown of thorns. If you look at the picture, you can kind of see this. The 3 styles represent the nails used in the crucifixion. The stamens represent the 5 wounds, and the 5 sepals and 5 petals represent 10 of the apostles, all but Judas, who betrayed Jesus, and St. Peter, who denied him 3 times on the night of his trial. The leaves with 3 points represent the Holy Trinity, and the vine represents God's attachment to the earth. I love passion flowers. And then the dogwood. One of the most unique of the old legends handed down in the South is the story of the dogwood tree. The dogwood tree is a beautiful little tree that explodes in white blooms each spring and is one of the favorite blooming trees. It grows across the South and is popular as a yard tree, but it also grows wild in the woods across the region. The legend holds that the tree was once very large, like a great oak tree, and because its wood was strong and sturdy, it provided building material for a variety of purposes. According to the story, it was the dogwood tree that provided the wood used to build the cross on which Jesus was crucified. Because of its role in the crucifixion, it is said that God both cursed and blessed the tree. It was cursed to forever be small, so that it would never grow large enough again for its wood to be used as a cross. Its branches would be narrow and crooked, not very good for building at all. At the same time, however, the tree was blessed so that it would produce beautiful flowers each spring, just in time for Easter. To remember God's promise to the tree, it is said he gave it a few traits so that whoever looks upon it will never forget. The petals of the dogwood actually form the shape of a cross. Upon close examination, it can be seen that the blooms of the tree always have 4 petals. The middle of a dogwood flower has a tight grouping resembling a crown of thorns, and the tips of each plant are indented as if they had been bent by a nail. There are even colors in the petals which bring to mind the drops of blood that spilled during the crucifixion. You can barely tell the pink on the edge of that one on the right. So there you have it, the legend of the dogwood tree. St. John's wort. Christians throughout history have seen in creation God's masterful design and very often name plants after saints or other spiritual themes. They believe nature spoke of the grandeur of God and contained everything we need to maintain our bodies in good health. In particular, when the early Christians observed a plant with yellow flowers that bloomed around the feast of St. John the Baptist on June the 24th, they immediately put the two together. Early Christians also believed the plant had mystical properties. According to one legend, the greatest effect was obtained when the plant was harvested on St. John's Day, June the 24th, which is often the time of peak blooming. Another legend holds that the plant released its blood-red oil on August the 29th, the day of St. John's beheading. The striking arrangement of its 5 yellow petals resemble a halo, and when picked, a red crimson liquid is given off, which was believed by some to symbolize the spilled blood of their beloved John. Many historical authorities have questioned whether the infamous Rose of Sharon, as mentioned in the Bible, is really St. John's wort, although botanists have confirmed that the two distinct plants abide, but they are alike, but they are not the same, but they abide in the same family. That's what I'm trying to say. The herb was normally used for medicinal qualities. It was also thought to have the power to drive away demons and evil spirits. There was due in part to the association of St. John the Baptist and his feast on the longest day of the year, the day when light is stronger than darkness. For many centuries, the herb has been used as a remedy against depression or anxiety, primarily because medieval Christians believed demonic spirits were the source of a person's melancholy. Whatever the medicinal benefits of the herb, it has a long spiritual history and contains much symbolism that reminds Christians of their Creator. They see it as God's harmonious design and as a reflection of His love in humanity. And our beloved Texas bluebonnet. Bluebonnet folklore abounds with legends almost too numerous to count. Bluebonnets are said to symbolize bravery, sacrifice, and admiration. The Germano Native Americans have their own story about bluebonnets. According to them, when early missionaries came through New Mexico and Texas to spread the word of Christianity among the tribes, there many Germanos had dreams of a nun who was dressed in a beautiful shade of cobalt blue. It was after her final visit to slumbering tribe members that the members woke to find the field they slept in covered in beautiful bluebonnets to match the nun's habit. There are also some stories that say that flowers were brought to Texas by Spanish explorers. One version says that the explorers were given the seeds from priests in the Holy Land, and the explorers brought them along for good luck. Another says that Spanish explorers used the seeds as a sort of bribe to Native Americans, trading bluebonnets and seeds in exchange for the native people's cooperation. Both of these stories are untrue. It is verified that bluebonnets are native to Texas, but still, these little bits of folklore circulate till today. One particular Native American tale about the bluebonnet came to be a staple in our culture. The legend describes how the weather in Texas hadn't exactly been kind to the natives. They suffered a catastrophic flood, which was followed by a devastating drought. Summers brought scorching temperatures and dust storms. Winters were harsh with blizzards. Food was scarce, causing many to starve. Disease swept through the tribes. It was clear the Great Spirit was angry with them. Medicine men performed ceremonies. Warriors cut their flesh. Yet efforts to appease them were unsuccessful. One night, a council of medicine men gathered around the fire when suddenly the Great Spirit spoke. He told them their plight was brought on by selfishness. The only way to make amends with him was to burn the tribe's most prized possession, then scatter the ashes to the four winds. Unbeknownst to the council, a little girl sat in the darkness listening. She clutched her cornhusk doll, dressed in a deerskin robe with horsehair braids and blue feathers. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she knew what she had to do. When everyone fell asleep, the child sneaked out of her teepee, gathered hot coals from the fire, and climbed up a hill. She used some leaves and twigs to build a fire. She lifted the doll, her most prized possession, high above her head and offered it to the Great Spirit. She tossed the doll into the fire as the flames leaped from the ground. Once the fire had burned out and cooled, she gathered up the ashes. The little girl turned north, south, east, and west, allowing the ashes to fall from her hands as she spun. The next morning, when the tribe awoke, the once barren landscape was covered with lush blankets of green and blue. It was clear the Great Spirit had forgiven them. The little girl told her parents what she had done, fearful she would be scolded for sneaking out. The tribe decided to rename her one who dearly loves her people. Have any of you ever seen a pink bluebonnet? I've seen a white one, but not the pink. Years ago, an old Hispanic grandmother was walking with her two grandchildren in the bluebonnet fields south of San Antonio. So thick were the blue petals across the plain that it looked as though the Texas sky was resting upon the earth. Scattered with the field of blue, a few white bluebonnets stood proudly at attention. The grandson asked, "Grandmother, why are some of the flowers white?" The old lady smiled and said, "The white ones were the inspiration for the pure white lone star on the field of blue that waves at us on our Texas flag." The granddaughter asked, "Grandmother, look, some are also pink. Why are some of them pink?" With a look of pride and reverence, she told the grandchildren, "The pink ones used to be white, but many years ago, much blood was shed upriver at the church we call the Alamo. The blood of our Texas heroes still rests within the earth, and to this day tints a few special flowers pink to forever remind us of the cost of freedom." And plants can predict weather. This is just kind of something I threw in. Did you know that plants can predict weather? Dandelions and some other plants, they can tell what temperature it is outside and when it's going to rain and more. The dandelion, despite their reputation as pesky long weeds, dandelions are also good indicators of rain, especially since you're likely to find them wherever you go. These herb flowers close when they detect moisture and reopen when the weather dries. Scarlet Pimpernel is such a good predictor of the weather, of fair and foul weather, that it has been nicknamed the poor man's weather glass. Its blooms remain open in full sun, but when skies turn cloudy or humidity reaches about 80%, they fold up like little rain-shy umbrellas. They do this to keep their pollen dry and their nectar from being diluted. Even fallen pine cones can be used to predict the weather. Pine cones have a unique property in that they can be utilized to predict rain. Pine cones keep their scales open in dry weather to drop pollen and seeds, but as humidity rises, the scales close to protect the seeds or pollen inside. The scales of the pine cone absorb moisture. They swell and crush shut, causing this. According to popular folklore, a persimmon can predict the winter weather. How do you make a persimmon forecast? It's easy. Just split open a seed of a locally grown fruit and look at the pattern inside. If the kernel is spoon-shaped, expect plenty of snow to be shoveled. If it is fork-shaped, plan on a mild winter with powdery light snow. If the kernel is knife-shaped, expect frigid winds that will cut like a blade. Do these predictions work? About as often as our groundhog shadow is accurate. The Earth star, it's observed during gloomy weather and predicts when conditions will clear. This fungus, which resembles a brown mushroom surrounded by a skirt of leathery petals, remains open during rainstorms. Raindrops help disperse its spores. So when these petals curl up and enclose the center spore sac, you can expect rain to end soon. Seaweed. If you're a coastal dweller, be sure to keep an eye on any surfaced seaweed. Pay particular attention to what this humidity-sensitive plant does after it washes ashore and lies exposed to the air. When it plumps up, that's an indicator the weather is damp and muggy. This is likely a result of the plant being coated with sea salt, which attracts moisture. If, however, the surface seaweed appears shriveled and dehydrated, take it as a sign that conditions are dry. Rhododendron, which are a lot like our azaleas. Curious to know the current air temperature, look to the nearest rhododendron shrub. When temperatures dip to 32 degrees Fahrenheit, which is freezing, a rhododendron's long, leathery leaves begin to droop and gradually curl inward. And at 20 degrees and lower, their leaves are tightly curled like cigars and point straight down to the ground. This behavior is basically a defense mechanism. Since rhododendron plants aren't able to soak up as much groundwater when the soil is frozen, they curl their leaves so as not to lose water through them. However, once temperatures creep back above the freezing mark, the rhododendron leaves fully uncurl and return to their flat oval shape. Some flowers that are linked with faiths. Lotuses. It is unlikely that there is a plant anywhere that is more closely associated with religious meaning than the lotus. Hinduism and Buddhism are both heavily associated with the lotus. In fact, the flower often acts as a symbol for both religions, just as the crescent moon does for Islam. In Buddhism, the lotus is associated with the most exalted and enlightening state of man. A person's head would be held high above the muck of the existence, but his feet would be rooted in experience. The lotus also represents the path a person must travel to reach enlightenment. They are born into the suffering of the world, just as the lotus begins in the mud below the waters of a pond. Then the person grows and eventually surpasses the needs of the world to bask in the light of enlightenment. In the same way, the lotus grows up through the water and opens in the light of the surface. Though they are more commonly associated with passion and romantic love today, roses in Christianity were used to represent a variety of different ideas. Roses sometimes are symbolic of the Virgin Mary, and the 5 petals of a rose are said to stand for the 5 wounds of Christ. The color of the rose also matters. Red roses represent martyrdom, Christ's passion and blood, and a love of God. White roses stand for purity. The bouquet of flowers a Christian bride carries in her wedding is meant to act as a token of fertility. Bouquets are a more modern take on an older custom which was to have brides wear a garland or a wreath of flowers around their heads. The flowers would have dual meanings. The flowers represented fertility, but if the wreath was made of roses, it also was a symbol of heavenly joy. Lilies are commonly used in Christian decorations around Easter. Lilies represent both Christ's miraculous conception and his resurrection. Legend has it that the first Easter lilies sprung up in the Garden of Gethsemane, from the places where Christ's blood touched the ground when he was praying. The white petals of the lily represent Christ's purity and life after death. The gold stamen, despite some Easter lilies having darker stamens, is said to stand for Christ's kingship, and the trumpet shape signifies Gabriel's trumpet call to rebirth and new life. Lilies also symbolize the Virgin Mary and Christ's birth. The white petals signify her virginal state, and the gold stamens stand for her radiant soul. Legend has it that the lily used to be yellow, but when the Virgin Mary touched it, it turned white. Although there are not many symbolic flowers in Islam, orange flowers are often planted in Islamic gardens that are specifically designed for meditation. The trees were chosen for their sweet-smelling orange blossoms and because they had practical uses. The branches and leaves of orange trees would protect the person meditating from the harsh sun, and the tree would also provide food during the day for those who used to own the meditation gardens. Though not a traditional flower, no list of religious plants would be complete without the olive tree. From ancient times until today, the olive branches have long been a symbol of peace and victory throughout much of the world. The tree also holds a special significance to each of the three Abrahamic regions. Muslims associate olive trees with paradise, and it is said that Muhammad anointed himself with olive oil so often that his prayer shawl became saturated with it. In Christianity, some traditions hold that Christ was crucified on a cross made of olive wood, and archaeologists have found crucifixion nails that have had slivers of olive wood still attached. For Jews, the olive tree represents peace, prosperity, beauty, and God's relationship with his people. Olive oil was used for many things in ancient Israel, from cooking to anointing kings, and olive branches still appear on the Israeli emblem today to honor of that history. The iris is sometimes called the sword lily, and for this reason was used most often in connection with Our Lady of Sorrows. In Christianity, iris petals symbolize the Holy Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. They are associated with the resurrection and the passion of Christ. This is fitting when we consider that the flower most often blooms in the springtime. It also represents the Virgin Mary. The periwinkle is also named the virgin flower, and its blue color connects it to Mary, who is usually depicted wearing blue. And the Lady Slipper Orchid originally was referred to as Our Lady's Slipper, and this flower has a popular legend that says that it first sprang forth at the touch of Mary's foot. There are so many wonderful plants and trees that you can grow in your garden space, and so many of them have a strong and magical folklore history. Some of them are wonderful, it's true, while others may be a bit more dangerous. Their history is fascinating. That much is for sure, and with the right gardening knowledge and caution, you can enjoy even the most magical and superstitious of plants for yourself. That's all, folks.